Okay, so this is the SIG Cluster Lifecycle focused meeting for getting forward on kubeadm upgrades and talking more in detail about the implementation details of kubeadmin and making sure that we meet the goals we have for this cycle.
Before we start getting into it, is someone going to take notes? Because sometimes people ask for the notes for this meeting.
Robert, could you take them?
Yeah. Also, on that note, some of the other breakouts have their own note stock and aren't throwing them into the overall SIG cluster lifecycle notes. Do people think that would be valuable to have a separate doc for notes for this meeting, or do we like keeping them in line with the other ones?
Yes.
To which, sorry.
One, the separation. Different threads separately.
Okay.
Lucas, could you create a doc so we can share it publicly so that I don't have to do the stupid Google domain thing? And then I will.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to do it retroactively, like move over everything we see is from this meeting. Anyway, I'll do that quite in an hour.
Okay, yeah, I'll take notes in the regular doc, and then if you send another one to me, I can move it over.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, so first, well, let's fill in the attending list. But yeah, so first we have SIG Federation. From that Mike filed the issue that kubeup is deprecated and we should move everything from cluster, even cluster GCE. And there was a thread spawned about federation, how we should move that over, which is interesting. So I guess we're going to talk about that now more in detail, as Madhu and Sashi came here.
Okay, yeah, I will let Shashi do this. He's going to probably be owning this. So yeah.
Okay, so the initial idea. Okay, shall I share the screen? Or because we can open the issue?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to share a screen, that would be fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is what we think what is required to move current mechanism of bringing up the clusters to kubeadm based deployment method for federation. So these are few of the smaller tasks we have broken down, like to make the progress towards this target. So the few points are like we need to discuss. I think most of the things are straightforward, and I think current target we are using in test infra is GCE with kubeadm, and most probably VNet for the pod networking. That's the same combination. So here, like we were discussing, actually, me and Madhu, should we bring up the multiple clusters within Kubernetes Anywhere or with the within Kubernetes, like external to Kubernetes Anywhere, and also the same applies to the federation control plane bringing up. So we were in sync, like we should do the multiple cluster bring up inside the Kubernetes Anywhere, like another configuration option where we can suggest like how many clusters we want to bring up, and then based on that we choose like which all zones to place the clusters and bring up the cluster. Okay, that's one part of it. And the second part of it is the bring up the federation control plane. So I'm not sure whether it should be within Kubernetes Anywhere or Kubernetes.
I feel like both of those things should not be in Kubernetes Anywhere. I mean, maybe the federation control plane, there could be an option for that, but it doesn't really make sense to me for a single call of create a cluster to all of a sudden create multiple clusters. It's pretty easy to layer on top of it and create multiple clusters in parallel from like the test framework.
Yeah, but yeah, Madhu.
One argument that I had was Terraform already provides, Terraform automatically already does things in parallel. So I was suggesting that we just generate the required JSON file for, or change the JSON net file to generate multiple of these things and generate a single JSON file and create all the infrastructure in Terraform. Terraform is anyway going to create things in parallel, and that's somewhat easier for debugging, especially given how the logs are printed. If we are going to do things in parallel in kubetest, interleaved logging might cause problems, was my point.
Sorry, what might cause problems with doing it in parallel at the next layer up?
Interleaved logging.
Also, the testing process, right? You should include the kubetest and test and debug the process. If you are using just the Kubernetes Anywhere, should be good enough. It's a simple base layer we are testing.
So it's not just changing the Terraform though, right? Because Kubernetes Anywhere, well, like the Terraform, you could say, create me sort of 3 copies of my cluster in the same zone or in different zones. But there's also like the flow through to the following steps where you run kubeadm after you run the Terraform step. And you're going to have to somehow run sort of 3 different kubeadmins or n different kubeadmins in stage 2 of Kubernetes Anywhere, right?
Yeah.
That's true. My understanding was that these things would run in the VMs that were created for nodes anyway, and it wouldn't matter if we gave the right configuration. Isn't that true?
Yeah, so we have startup scripts for the VMs that just phase 2 is logically separated, but in implementation, it's actually attached to phase 1 as part of the VM startup script. So I think the difficulty there is going to be creating the JSON files for, tripling all of the resources that you need. And I don't really know where we should land with this one. I'm kind of on the fence if it should be a layer above K8s Anywhere or inside it.
Okay, if there is a strong consensus that we should do this in kubetest, I'm fine doing that. It's just my, I don't know. I think it might be problematic for debugging, but that's just hypothetical. I don't have any data for it. So, yeah.
Which part would be problematic? Just the fact that you see like log lines interleaved? Because it seems to me like if you give each cluster like a name, then you can easily prefix your log lines with the cluster name, and you can sort of rejigger the log lines very simply to like flow for each one separately.
Sure, but yeah, that's works that somebody has to do, right? As an integrate with Terraform logs, right? Is it easy?
Sure.
Is it really easy to do it with Terraform? Like, I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay. Because last time I tried Kubernetes Anywhere, Terraform printed a ton of logs, like really a ton of logs. Yeah, depending on the mod, I think there are different logging levels, I guess. But some level where I wanted to debug, it printed a ton of logs, and sifting through things was already difficult for one cluster.
Okay, and where do those logs go, right? Because if you're using kubetest to execute Terraform, presumably you can redirect those logs from each separate invocation of Terraform to different files, or you can capture them and prefix every line. It seems like there should be a way to wrap that Terraform output simply so you can keep the flows separate.
Yeah. That's true if you're running in the CI mode or the pre-submit mode, where we don't really directly have access to standard output or standard error. My only thing is it might be problematic in local debugging. But again, I don't want to like rat hole on this thing. Either approaches are fine.
Okay, yeah, it just seems like a bit of a layering violation to me, to make something that's intended to deploy a cluster all of a sudden have logic to know how to deploy multiple clusters. And each of those clusters presumably is not really going to be very different from each other. Like you guys probably want to just like deploy 3 of the same thing. And is that really useful to someone who's just trying to use Kubernetes Anywhere as a direct tool?
Sure.
And maybe the answer is yes. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds reasonable.
Tim, in the chat, you put agreed somewhere earlier in this conversation. I can't tell what you were agreeing with.
Yeah.
Both the last statement as well as the logging. I do believe that we shouldn't conflate these things. So.
Yeah, one of the pain point in federation we are having is like current bring up is kind of sequential, and it takes a lot of time, around 15 minutes to bring up 3 clusters, and that's why we have alternative mechanisms to recycle the clusters. So that's one of a pain right now. So we probably want to do it parallel, and probably also want to easily find out what's the issues. So probably logs also should have some markers to easily distinguish for which cluster it is. Yeah.
So if we if we do it from kubetest, like from the test info repo, we'd be able to pretty easily spin out clusters in parallel, right?
I'm not sure. Like right now, we saw like all the Terraform log is outputted. I don't see any cluster related marking. Yeah, you can go in detail of the record. Maybe you can find some clues, but generally for all the resources, we may not be able to find it out, I believe.
Okay. So what about networking? Are you able to use WeaveNet or?
Yeah, networking again. Okay, I just realized a day ago. Like right now, only default networking is used in GCE. So there's no provision of any new cluster if I specify. Even though it's there in config, I can specify any network. It won't be provisioned. So that's one of. But I think it should be okay with federation because right now the E2E scenario, which is calling Kubernetes, is assigning the network, and that network is what we are using. But really, default is also fine, I think.
Yeah, I don't have any specific opinion there.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, Terraform implementation of this GCE does not really provision the network resources. It is just default network is already there in the GCE, so it is just using it. Okay. So that's kind of a not so configurable parameter in Kubernetes anywhere right now.
I think the end goal is to add support for Flannel and a lot of others as well, but it seems that they've stalled out the PRs right now.
Okay, yeah, we can discuss this and subsequent issues of PRs. Okay. So that's one of the thing. I think pretty much everything else is fine, I believe. Madhu, any other concerns?
No, just the comments that I left on the issue the other day, but that's it. Right? But we discussed them offline, and it seems fine right now. So yeah. And the second point that I made on the issue was already discussed now, so it's all good. The only issue that I want to discuss right now is the kubeconfig one. Terraform generates a kubeconfig, and I think it stores in a temporary directory or somewhere. We want kubeconfig merging. So do you guys have any recommendations about what to do here? Because we want to merge configs from clusters, different clusters.
Jacob, do you have any idea?
So one thing that you should be aware of that's a kind of a gotcha, that isn't the question that you're asking, but a different question is, as part of the remnants of, if you've looked at the phase 2 implementation with Ignition, which predated the kubeadm implementation, the Terraform configuration was populating a local kubeconfig file. You probably saw that. That file is actually it won't work with kubeadm phase 2. So kubeadm generates its own kubeconfig directly on the master that we then have to fetch as a secondary step. So there's an additional parameter you can pass in Kubernetes anywhere. When you do make deploy, you can say wait for kubeconfig, and it will actually reach out to the master, via SSH, and then grab the new kubeconfig file. You need to use that file instead of the one that might happen to be in like .temp or wherever Terraform's placing one locally. So make sure you're using the right one. What kind of merging are you trying to do with multiple kubeconfig files?
So thanks for answering that. I did not think about that at all. So thank you. So each cluster gets its own kubeconfig, right? When you fetch that using Kubernetes Anywhere, does it automatically merge to the current kubeconfig file on my local machine?
No, it pulls it down to a brand new file.
Okay, so so in Federation, obviously we have multiple clusters, and so we have multiple kube configs. Our testing relies on the fact that these are all in the same kube config file. We actually read the kube config file in our test setup. So we want these things to be in a single file for all the clusters. How do we go about that?
Yeah, I don't know of a particular tool that will do the merging. I don't know if it exists.
Can we use kube control in any of these paths? Because if we use kube control, we can probably merge it using one of the kube control commands.
I think that might be possible, yeah, to exec kube control and somewhere we get them into the same.
So even if you merge all of the kube configs into a single file, you're still going to have to pass a parameter to kube control to tell it which cluster you're currently talking to, right?
That's true.
So why can't you just pass a flag to kube control to point to the different kube config and have them in separate files?
I mean, that's fine, but then we also had to change our test infrastructure because the test setup, not the infra setup, but the actual test itself, as part of the setup and teardown process, actually reads kubeconfig to figure out what clusters it needs to talk to.
Okay.
I see, yeah. Okay, but I think we can solve that one. But in which phase is kubefed like used? When we have all three clusters, then we and the merge kubeconfig, do we run kubefed then, or?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, that's right. That's right. That part of infrastructure is already there in kubetest. So it today it runs bring up multiple Kubernetes clusters and then run kubefed. So that part of the problem is solved as long as we figure out how we bring up multiple clusters and that's it, and get the right kubeconfig.
Yeah, I was just looking at kubectl help, and I don't see any commands there to like feed it multiple kube configs and have it merge. It seems like that would be a logical place for that behavior to exist.
Actually, there is a trick to do it using kubecontrol config command. It's not well documented. I have it written down somewhere. I can send it to you, send it to the SIG or something, or share it with all of you later.
Cool.
It's more of a hack, but it works.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I mean, one last question. This is post commit, right? And will it, or is it pre-commit as well?
Both.
Yes, both, yeah. So will it bring up 3 clusters per commit, or will it like build some like cluster for day and use it and tear down afterwards, or?
So right now our setup is, the setup for CI is simple. It brings up all the clusters every time, like 3 clusters every single time, and runs the tests. But that's super slow. Just we had hard time parallelizing things with cluster scripts, as in queue up, queue down scripts. So we did things in serial. So our tests usually take about 80 minutes if we do everything, as in bring up and tear down clusters every single time, of which 50 minutes is just bringing up and tearing down clusters. And that's not viable for pre-submits, right? We did not want to make every single person writing a PR wait for that long just to bring up and tear down clusters. So this complicated setup that we have is we bring up the clusters once every day at midnight Pacific time, and then just reuse that cluster and actually bring up and tear down federation control plane every single time. This has caused issues when there are PRs which get merged into Kubernetes that goes out of sync with federation control plane, and that just blocks the submit queue for everyone. So with this migration, we are also trying to solve that problem. And we think if we can bring up clusters in parallel, this problem is automatically solved, because then bringing up federation is not any slower than other Kubernetes tests.
No, I see the latest post commit test for kubeadm took 67 minutes with all the conformance tests. So I think that's pretty good, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if we can bring up clusters in parallel, it shouldn't be any worse than other tests.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, that's fair enough. Yeah. So yeah, that one.
The thing is, bringing up federation control plane is really fast. It usually shouldn't take more than a minute or two. So yeah, that time shouldn't matter. And there are not that many federation tests. We only have about 26 to 30 of these. So and they all run in parallel. So it's all good.
Okay. Is it both unit or just? Is it both unit and E2E or just E2E?
Right now, I'm only talking about E2E because unit tests are actually part of the Kubernetes unit test suite.
Yeah, exactly. That's the case for kubeadm as well. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah. Have we discussed everything that we were supposed
I think so. Whatever we could figure out till now, I think.
Yeah, cool. So do we have any timeline? Like, should we target
I think probably it should move fast. I think we could do it maybe another 2-3 weeks of time. So it depends on few other parallel tasks. So I cannot really comment. Maybe 1.9 timeline definitely will be able to move.
One thing I know we have yet to do is, I think Kubernetes Anywhere is using Jacob's fork, or?
Yeah. I noticed that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sorry, that's something that by me. It should be pretty straightforward at this point to move back to the original. I think I have 1 or 2 patches that need to go in.
Okay.
So,
I mean,
my priority has been the kubeadm pre-submit test, but that'll be my next priority.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will it happen in maybe a week or so?
I would expect yes.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, just tag me on reviews for that. And
Sure.
I'll look.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for your time. If this is it, I'm going to drop out of this call.
Yeah, and me too.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your help.
Thanks. Oh, and one other thing. I learned yesterday there's no submit queue on the test infra repo. So if your PRs for that repo are sitting, please poke someone that can merge them so we can get them in.
Okay.
Yesterday I was like LGTM, and I went and talked to Eric Feda, and I was like, when is this going in? And he's like, oh, you have to click the button. So I went and clicked the button.
Okay. Yeah.
If people forget to click the button on the test infra repo, please poke them so we don't get slowed down.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. So next on the agenda is Lucas with no text about what you want to talk about.
Oh. Well, so yeah. Let me see there. I made a PR, or like updated my upgrade PR, and I'll link to that in a second. There we go. Something. And yeah, so basically it's, of course it's not done, but I think I have pretty much everything working. I mean, the only thing that isn't working right now is dry run, I think. And I'll have to see if we can make some kind of recorder or make that automated instead of like having to do it manually on every step. So that's, and I have the UX in the, should I paste it somewhere? And do you want to comment? I mean, I could do a demo as well.
I think maybe for the UX, it would be useful to do the demo during the broader meeting on Tuesdays to get more feedback. I think if here we can focus on sort of the nitty-gritty implementation details, but like the UX is something that everybody who uses the command is going to have to deal with. And I think a larger audience for that would be useful.
I think probably PSAing that the PR is up and ready for review, and you already pinged me, so I'm gonna start that process soon.
Yeah, I saw a note in Slack. I don't know if we want to do anything more than that. We can maybe send a note to the SIG mailing list if people might look at that more frequently.
Yeah, I posted in the SIG Cluster Lifecycle chat in SIG PM so that they know it's like ongoing, and I said I could demo it in some meeting if they want, and in the kubeadm Slack channel. Mailing list sounds fine to me as well. So yeah, one large OS site that I realized was that we're now like talking to SIG apps and want to have this new upgrade strategy in, but it's of no use for our like 1.7 to 1.8 migration because 1.7 doesn't have this field. So it's useful first in the 1.8 to 1.9 migration. So the way I implemented it now is just like write the new manifests to a temporary directory and move one by one, move over the manifest, look that it comes up cleanly, and then go to the next one. And then after the static pod manifest are upgraded, it's going to upgrade to self-hosted. But I'm not sure, like right now, we don't strictly need self-hosting, like for this task, actually. But I mean, should we enable it / do it by default anyway? I mean, I think it's good to be like future-proof, but yeah.
So you're saying that if you deploy 1.7 using kubeadm and then you upgrade, you get the 1.8 version of kubeadmin and you try to upgrade, you're asking if by default we should switch you from where you are now into a self-hosted cluster.
Yeah. I mean, the plan was to use self-hosting for upgrading, but we can't do that.
Right.
Really. I mean, we could wait as well. I mean, well, we might. I mean, I could add support for upgrading a self-hosted cluster, like the hacky way with the temporary daemon sets thing. I could add support for it so it doesn't error out if you do that. But still, I mean, should we do it as a post-upgrade step, or should we just wait and do it like in the 1.8 to 1.9 migration where we're really sure that like we have the right upgrade strategy of the daemon sets?
I would say 1.8, 1.9.
Yeah, I would agree. I would tend to lean towards, for now, you don't migrate people to self-hosted in the 1.7 to 1.8, but with 1.8, we start creating clusters as self-hosted, and then sort of 1.8 forward, we keep the upgrades of self-hosted people working, and then we try to migrate people into self-hosted with 1.9.
Okay, so instead we're deploying self-hosted clusters by default.
Yes, with 1.8.
Yeah, that sounds good to me, because I mean, then for people that are like, I'm doing kubeadm init and get a 1.8 cluster by default using the CLI 1.8, and then I want to upgrade to 1.8.1, and I already have a self-hosted cluster, and it's okay to like the upgrade strategy is there, so it's easy to do the 0.0 to 0.1 migration. Yeah, that sounds good to me. I'll add some details about that in the upgrade doc, because right now it's not really mentioned in that way. I mean, I don't know how we could make such an oversight, but I mean, it's okay.
Yeah, so I put the plan of record here into the notes. We should also socialize that among the larger SIG as well, for all the people that aren't here today. Again, maybe at the meeting on Tuesday or in Slack or email.
Yeah, so any other comments?
I think people just need to digest and review at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot more code than I had expected. Like when I actually like started thinking about all the edge cases and all the policies we want to enforce, it got to be a lot of code. But well, luckily enough, most of it is unit testing, and like I've tried to list all the cases I could possibly think of in there. So for the killer functions, like one of them is like, which versions can I upgrade to? That's a pretty long function, and there's 400 lines of unit tests. So, and the other is like, is my chosen version, when I do apply, is it valid? Can I like actually do it? Yeah, one thing to discuss is, should we support reconfiguration? Like, should we support upgrading with just a new config file and the same version? Right now, it errors out and says this is not supported, but you can force this with -- force.
That would be kind of a nice way to be able to change your mind about config parameters you passed in. Although I think some of them are probably less immutable than others, right? Like if you try to change your cluster CIDR, what is that going to do exactly?
Exactly, and also like the API server port, that's also one you can't change, because if you do so, it will try to connect to the wrong endpoint, and will never.
So I think erroring out for now and letting people override with a force if they think that they know what they're doing makes a lot of sense. And once we actually have upgrades working, we can go back and rethink if we want to use sort of that similar mechanism for changing parameters. Because I think there are some use cases where that makes a lot of sense. But it's not clear to me yet that we know exactly what they are.
So like that issue you brought up with changing something like cluster CIDR also applies in the upgrade case, right? I mean, you also don't want to be changing some of those parameters on upgrade. But that seems sort of orthogonal to whether we support reconfiguration on other things.
Yeah, I guess that's a question. Do we allow what parameters, if any, do we allow changing on upgrades other than the version?
There's no policy right now enforcing all. I mean, I don't know.
It seems, I don't know, we're getting into weird territory because you're literally reprovisioning, right? In some sense, you could be.
Yeah, I mean,
this would all be stuff that would be really nice someday to have in component config, have validation where you know which parts of it are mutable and which parts aren't.
Yeah, well, there's also the notion that like we shouldn't be treating too many clusters. We should try to strive, I think, also as a group and as an ecosystem, to not treat your clusters as if they're precious ponies sometimes, and to have the ability to migrate your workloads off. It's part of some of the other stuff we've been working on. But there's the notion that a lot of people want it to be they have all these scenarios that they need to support of reconfiguration or doing other things that make it way more complicated than it needs to be. And if we just simplify as much as possible and say like, okay, let's just tear down workloads and either federate off or do some other things, it allows them to, to simplify our scenarios too. It makes all the use cases much simpler.
Yeah, I guess we should have brought it up when the Federation folks were here. But to me, the main blocker for doing that today isn't being able to like suck your YAML out of one cluster and put it into another. It's being able to migrate things piecemeal and say like, I have 10 microservices in cluster A. I'm going to move the first microservice to cluster B, and everything will keep working, and I can do them one at a time. And that's really an issue sort of with Federation, or is where it's falling, but it's the cross-cluster services. If we had cross-cluster services working, I think that would be a pretty easy thing for people to do manually or automate, at which point I think it'd be a lot easier not to treat your clusters as pets. If you have to do like a wholesale, stop the world, move everything, restart the world, that's a lot more difficult for people who want to keep their applications online. So Fabio and I were talking about this yesterday, and we were planning to go poke the Federation people about it.
I think you were about to say something some minutes ago, Tim.
I just said what I wanted to say.
Okay.
I think I do think that managing multiple clusters makes a lot of sense, and that's how, when I did cluster ops before, that's what we did basically, was throw away clusters, even on minor version upgrades, basically. But in general, that puts us in a risk. So taking that to extreme would mean we don't support upgrades at all. But that's a really dangerous place to be for security patches. Like, you need to at least make point upgrades, like upgrading Kubernetes components themselves to like in place. This is a really important use case.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying the reconf on upgrade is the weird space. Right?
I think that might be a good place to draw the line about what's reasonable and what's not reasonable. Is like, what would you need to do in place for a security upgrade versus some more general kind of cluster reconfiguration.
Yeah. Do we have any other thing? Yeah, so I guess it's, well, the PR is larger than it will be once it's finalized. Of course, there was some like refactoring I had to do internally and move around stuff in order to make it reusable from like the upgrade phase of things. So I'll just split all those things out to separate logical PLs. But what's ready for review now is like app phases upgrade and CMD upgrade. And yeah, there's quite some things there to dive into already.
Can I ask, what level of feedback are you looking for on those things right now? Like, are we still challenging the UX? Are you just making sure you're on the right track, but you're still going to do a lot of refactoring? Like, obviously, you're not looking for nitty gritty, like line by line at this point, because you're still talking about refactoring, and the code's going to look a lot different. So, what kind of feedback are you looking for?
So I think, I'm probably gonna refactor something in the like upgrade package, but I hope not. I mean, more like look at the upgrade phases upgrades package and see like, does the like file structure structs look sane? I mean, is the logic somehow like as it should be, or does it look really strange? Or like, have I missed something completely in some function or things like that? More than just like style nits. I mean, I'm gonna turn on GoLint and such things, fix that. So yeah, more higher level, but like in the code still. The main package. yeah, I think that's it for now. So
Cool. All right, Tim, you've got a link to your checkpointing draft.
So there's not much to it, honestly. I went and I talked with Yiju this last week, and we're pretty much on the same page. She wants it to be more general purpose and the proposal to be willing or mindfully vague on what could potentially be checkpointed in the future. But we'll probably have a phases section to outline that we are planning on pods first, obviously, and then potentially moving to config maps second. So I know Aaron had a concern with regards to other pieces, but the proposal is meant to be willing or vague enough to support any arbitrary resources, and not call out anything explicitly other than pods at this point.
Yeah, I guess my main concern is like if we don't call out that we want to support these, if we're omitting it, then no one's going to work on it. And then we have to go through the same thing again, which is trying to find a champion in SIG node and like trying to force it through. And it's like, it's been 2 years longer, actually. This is like issue 400 or something of kubelet checkpointing. And so if we don't put it in there, at least talking about it, that's my fear, is that it's just never going to move forward.
The uncontroversial ones are config maps and pods, right? The controversial one is secrets.
I really don't understand that. All right, like transport of secrets, I feel like could be controversial. People don't think that the transport of a secret from the API server to the kubelets is actually secure. I get that. But if it's already on the node and you're expecting that secret to live on disk, like that's the option that we're exploring right now, is that kubeadm is going to put secret data on disk. And the only change here is that that data exists in memory and that we're copying it to disk. In both cases, it lives on disk. That's the part.
Then why isn't that just a host volume mount?
Well, if it's already in the kubeadm case, it is a host volume mount.
I know, but I'm trying to figure out, like, why are you using the secrets resource if it's just a host volume mount?
Because fundamentally, I think that the ideal architecture for self-hosting is that there's no knowledge of the application that is going to be running on a host that lives on that host. So fundamentally, this should be that you are able to run a container runtime and start a kubelet with enough information to securely contact an API server, and that's it. And after that, all information about the applications that are run on the host are distributed as Kubernetes objects. So if you're running an API server, that the end goal should be that everything that it needs to know and how to actually run should be just objects that are distributed with it. And I get that there's like concerns about distributions of secrets and such, but I feel like that's almost a completely separate concern.
Well, it seems like just the semantics of secrets. If you were to specify a resource object that was just a host volume mount and that was just magically work, I don't see why they would be any different than just specifying the host volume mount explicitly, because you're knitting on a subtle detail of the Kubernetes resource object, but essentially it is always going to be a host volume mount, because we're not going to we've specified, or at least other people have specified, that they do not want to have certs and keys and tokens in secrets for the control plane, right?
Well, so if you're saying it's a host volume mount, what is the way in which you want it to be distributed to that node? Because I would argue that telling a node is a master should be purely defined through labels and taints. It shouldn't be that you have to run a particular tool that is going to set up particular things on that host.
It's an argument to the parameter of the pod right now, is what it is. It's just an argument to the pod.
Right, but how do you get that data to that location? How is that distributed? You say a host.
It's done by the provisioning tool, right? Like, so right now the provisioning tool itself lays down the secrets. It doesn't get, and when the HA scenario, it's going to be slightly different because they want to transport. One of the things we've been talking about, we haven't decided yet, is the transport using CRDs, right? So that to get your secrets from point A to point B, that it would transfer across CRDs and then be propagated on the machine itself. Or you could use your Terraform or Ansible or whatever to actually do the transport too.
That's where I just have I think a pretty base disagreement in that like in the idea that it shouldn't be external tools, that we have all of these distribution mechanisms of applications in Kubernetes, and if we're concerned about secrets, we should fix secrets. We shauldn't be inventing new ways to distribute secrets. We don't.
I'm not gonna see. This is where the security folks in this SIG auth have very strong opinions on this, and I don't. Every time I dwell into it, it's partially considered kabuki theater. And I don't really want to get involved in that game. I understand your point and I actually agree with it, but there's a part of me that just says, I want to listen to the security experts and not do the things that they cringe on at this time.
Well, so I think that their concerns are not ones that we actually have to solve, because essentially using or not using secrets would become optional. But their concerns are about the distribution of secrets, not about whether a secret already is local to a node in memory and that we're copying it to disk. I don't think that they care about that, because if Terraform is copying it to disk, or a CRD is copying it to a disk, or the secret gets copied to a disk, and you're optionally, like you're opting into that behavior, I don't think that they would find that very contentious at all. I mean, we could validate that, but it's just backing up. This is that my thought about self-hosting and the value that you get out of it is that the applications that you're going to run don't need to know anything about the host.
I think what I want to do so I can move forwards is I could put an optional portion at the end that says that secrets are still a item that requires further consensus before we move forwards on it. You know, it just a willfully vague argument that says, like, you know, people are thinking about it. We haven't yet decided on what we want to do.
Lucas, you had your hand up first.
Go on, Matt.
Oh, okay, so I think part of the confusion, to clarify, when you're talking about CRDs, the use case for CRDs for self-hosting, really basically just as a secret, a type of secret that is easier to restrict access to via RBAC, right? Like a function basically the same as a secret. So I think that part of the proposal of sort of future HA version using CRDs is the sort of fully self-hosted version where the master is only identified by a label retained.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with Aaron. Like that this is the end goal. I mean, when you now explain like the checkpointing part of it, I think it's more reasonable than I thought it was yesterday, I guess. Still, I mean, we as Tim said, we still have this general, like, we shouldn't put like control plane certificates in secrets, recommendation from SIG auth, like generally. And I mean, I'm fine with that. I think that's okay for now. But yeah, technically, how hard would it be to checkpoint secrets, Tim? I mean, would it be the same as config map? Just it's more like
It's none of this code is that hard. I think the hardest part is getting us to agree and me having 10 conversations on the same topic over and over with slightly different semantics and this other stuff, right? So
I definitely agree that like the phases thing and like doing simple stuff first and then kind of moving the needle forward. I just have this huge concern that if this isn't like actually discussed and at least some buy-in initially of like we should be targeting these things, the next release we're going to have it's going to be another battle to try and get these things in. And 100% like Bootkube, Tectonic will just not use kubelet checkpointing like at all. And that'll be the reality, which will just really, I mean, I would be really, really bummed on that. And so if this isn't even like discussed, then it's essentially, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 more releases before we'd even be able to entertain using it.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think maybe we should have like a conversation, perhaps bringing in some of the SIG node folks.
And SIG auth.
SIG node and SIG auth, maybe to the next meeting of this group, right? Not necessarily the broader group. to just hash out what exactly we want to do in this cycle, right? The draft is up and it's willfully vague, right? Because Juve specified wanting to checkpoint a lot more things, and to be honest, I don't care. I just want to get this done because the amount of time I'm spending communicating is far greater than actual code, right? So at this point, I'm happy to just keep on getting the needle move forward. So it seems like a logistical constraint right now to try and get SIG node, SIG auth, and cluster lifecycle into one little small short discussion about this one.
Yes. Aaron, can you take an action to try and rope the appropriate folks into the meeting next week, which, by the way, is on Wednesday instead of Friday, if people don't remember.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that.
We have 2.5 minutes left. So can we move on? I have one more agenda item to discuss briefly, which is we have a new person on our team in the Google Seattle office who is starting to look at upgrade tests for kubeadm. And I wanted to double check with Lucas, so we're deconflicted, because I think you'd mentioned on one of the issues that someone else was also looking at this. So her name's Jessica. She is starting by trying to build a little bit of automation around the manual upgrade procedure that Jacob put in place for the 1.6 to 1.7 upgrades. Once we have that in place, it shouldn't be difficult to parameterize the upgrade test infrastructure to do 1.7 to 1.8 upgrades, and once the kubeadm upgrade command exists, to use that instead of what we'd used manually before.
Yeah, so Fabrizio Pandini, has written a doc, but I don't think he has written any code. He's writing on a kubeadm something else like phases right now. Let me see if I can grab that. There we go. So it basically was like request for comments. There we go. So that document should be public, I think, and basically outlines some possible solutions. And he looked into like how test infra would be changed, how we'd do it pretty easily. And I think the main like action item from it was to be able to run arbitrary scripts or commands, like in between or something, to be able to upgrade. It's still like, yeah, it's still pretty much open on most points. So now when I'm reading it, but yeah, I mean, it could serve as a baseline for Jessica.
Okay. Yeah, I know that Jacob and Jessica had done sort of a little bit of a mind meld yesterday because Jacob had some ideas about how to do this also. I'm not sure if, Jacob, have you seen that doc, or were you just going from your own experience with the test infra stuff?
I actually don't think I've seen this. I probably should have seen this at some point. I might have gone through. I commented on an email thread, or maybe it was an issue, but yeah, I was mostly drawing from, it looks very similar to what I recommended to her.
Okay. Excellent. So maybe we can point her at that doc and fill in some details as we're going. And if Fabrizio wants to help, I mean, I'm sure that it would be great to have someone to collaborate with. But yeah, other than that, I think Jess is going to start running with it.
Sounds really good. Yeah, I mean, as soon as my upgrades PR is merged as well, I mean, it needs to get EDE tested as soon as possible. So if we have the route ready by then, I mean, it's going to probably take at least 2 weeks. I expect it will take before the full upgrades PR is in, due to all the reviews and dependencies it has. So yeah, but sounds good to me. And yeah, by the way, Jacob, could we schedule the get to know test infra thing
Yeah. I'll post in Slack and see who's actually interested. And I would love to do a brain dump with everyone. I just did the same thing with Jessica and realized how tangled everything is. So every time I try to write it down, I have no idea how to organize it. But if it's a back and forth interactive thing, I can be all over the place.
Okay, yeah, sounds good to me.
I'll try to coordinate that on Slack.
Yeah, perfect. I think that's it for this week. Then.
All right. Thanks everyone for coming. We'll see everybody on Tuesday at the regular meeting.
Yeah. See you.